Hey, what's going on, everybody? Episode 178 of the White Cat Outdoors podcast. This week we just got me, Nick, and my cousin Frank in the studio. Tom's got some farm work we had to do to, prepare for season. So he gets a pass this week. Had to use a sick day, but that's all right. This week we're bringing Frank to talk a little bit more about his traditional archery venture this year. He's been shooting every single day, and, we're kind of just going through, how he's progressing, some of the troubles he's run into, and, plans for the rest of the year as we get closer to the season, because we know it's going to sneak up on us. But it's a really informative episode. If it's something that you're interested in doing this year, now's the time to get started. So we hope you really enjoy this episode, and maybe it'll spark some interest in getting you into traditional archery this year. So without further ado, let's get tuned into this week's episode.
So I did the cardinal sin. I pull up my bow, and then I look dead at his antlers. I got out of the truck, and when I slammed the door, I heard gobbles all around me.
Let's see it.
Alaska, moose, spot and sock. That is the bucket list. I agree.
White Cat Outdoors. White Cat Outdoors.
What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode with me and Nick tonight. Tom's not here. He's out mowing.
Yeah, he's got work to do, so I guess we'll give him a pass.
Yeah.
He's running out of sick days already.
He is, too. But,
Shame.
hey, I used one last week, so it's all right.
Yeah, that was a fun episode with Trevor, getting him on and
Yeah, I
discussing his first turkey hunts and I think we talked about his first buck as well, which is fun.
Yeah.
So
He's good, dude.
yeah.
Good time.
Speaking of deer hunting, we've talked about it briefly, in the past couple months or so, but you've been practicing making the switch over to traditional archery.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we've talked about your bow and everything, but you've been shooting quite a bit, getting better. And if somebody was interested in getting in traditional archery, I think the time is now to start practicing. Like, people should be shooting their bows anyway, especially with how nice it is.
Yeah.
But especially if you're going to be getting into traditional archery, you need to be shooting now. Like, you can't be waiting until September to, dust off the old stick and string.
Yes, that you definitely want to be way into it already. Especially, like you said, if you're just getting into it, you want to be way into it. And even people that have been doing it for a long time, that's one of those things that you have to do it all the time. It's not like your compound, and not to say that your compound's easier to shoot per se. I mean, it is.
I think arguably you could easily say that it's easier.
But it's easier to pick it up and, get your knock points, your anchor points, and settle in.
Within a few days, I'm shooting darts.
Exactly. And even if you're someone that's shot a recurve before, like I've talked to other people that have shot, and they say, like, if I'm not shooting every day, then they start to lose it. Like, if they shoot twice a week, they can feel that and see it, and especially feel it, because it's a totally different kind of strength, is something that I've really noticed pulling that.
What do you mean by like a different, like different muscles, or what are you getting
It's the
at?
same muscles, but like pulling, I've always pulled a 70-pound bow. Mm-hmm. And my recurve is a 50-pound bow at my draw length. And it is.
So how does that work? So like the longer your draw length, the longer, or like the heavier the bow will be at your full draw. Is that what that is?
Yeah, like when you buy a bow, they're rated like a 50-pound bow, a 45-pound bow, a 70-pound bow. They're rated at 28 inches.
Okay.
And I happen to have a 28-inch draw, so my bow is a 50-pound bow, so my draw is 50 pounds.
So if you say somebody like
you
me,
have a longer draw.
Yeah,
If
I
you
shoot
were to
29 and a half.
Yeah, if you were to pull my bow, and they say that most bows are around like 3 pounds an inch. So like,
And they're safe to pull. further like that?
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because I know like Tom shoots, I think, like a 31-inch draw. Like Tom's got some arms.
Yeah. Yeah, he could draw my bow. It's just going to get heavier and heavier. The farther you pull it back, the heavier it's going to get.
So he's going to be shooting like 62 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and you don't have the let off. When you pull that back, you are feeling all of that weight. And pulling that 50-pound bow feels so much heavier. Even like if I half draw my compound and get to where it peaks at 70 pounds, just it doesn't feel as heavy as my recurve. And then you don't have the let off. You're holding that full 50 pounds, and I don't hold. I snap, shoot. So I don't feel it the whole time, but still pulling back that 50 pounds, and it doesn't let off. So when you get back to your anchor point, you're holding that full weight, and it's very, very, very different getting on target, staying on target when you're holding that full weight rather than getting 80% let off, and now you're only holding 15, 20 pounds.
So do you notice that you tire quicker when you're shooting shooting a traditional bow?
Yeah, and that's like the biggest obstacle at first for me with getting consistent, and I was getting kind of frustrated at first, like I feel like I should be progressing faster as far as my groups go and like shooting more consistently. Mm-hmm. But the biggest barrier to that is having the strength to pull your bow back consistently, get to your anchor point consistently, because it's not like you, with a compound, your cams are set to your draw.
Yeah.
You can't pull it farther.
So if you're pulling a little bit further
or a little bit less,
you're adding or taking away poundage, which is going to affect your
arrow flight.
Yeah.
So when I first started, I was weaker. Obviously, I wasn't used to pulling that bow back. I wasn't getting all the way back to my 28-inch draw and getting to my anchor points every time, and it just was a matter of building the strength and muscle memory of getting to that anchor point every time.
So have you noticed like your form being a lot more important? Because like with a compound, you know, especially like you have that IQ sight. Mm-hmm. So you have, you know, your peep sight that you're looking through, you have a level on your sight, you have the retina lock.
Yeah.
So like you've got, and then your anchor point, because you're holding instead of just snap shooting, there's several anchors that you can lock into, you know that, okay, my form's good. Mm-hmm. So what kind of challenges are you running into with, you know, no sight, no level, you know, no retina lock and snap shooting, so you're not really having a hold point? Mm-hmm. Like what sort of things are you having to do to overcome that, and what challenges have you came up with?
It's literally all 100% muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
Like I take notes while I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. I started taking notes after like the first month of shooting. I was like,
are you hitting your arm?
Yeah, you can see how I'm bruised a little bit. And that was part of gaining that strength, because like with a compound, when you get back to your full draw, it's easy to relax and you can kind of make sure your elbows rolled out of the way and easy. Mm-hmm. With the recurve, when you're pulling that full weight and trying to focus on so many different things with getting back to your anchor points and getting the correct draw length, it still is a bit of a struggle for me to keep my left arm. I'm a right-handed shooter, so my left arm's my lead arm.
Keeping that consistent.
Keeping my lead arm consistent. I've gotten to the point where my draw is consistent, and I'm still just struggling a little bit. Once in a while, I catch my arm because I'm not rolling my elbow out. I'm not keeping that perfect form every time. I've gotten leaps and bounds better.
Yeah, your grouping is really nice. I
Yeah.
mean, you threw 6 arrows that were all, you know, wasn't necessarily where you would want to hit, but they were all within a small enough area that if you can just move it, they're all kill shots.
Yeah.
So like you're staying like consistent.
Yeah.
With your shots, or accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's been definitely something that I've had to pay a lot more attention to with form, because we've always said that you can make a lot of mistakes when you're shooting 20 yards with a compound and still be pretty much driving tacks.
Yeah.
With that, those mistakes are amplified. It's like when you step out to 50, 60, 70 yards with a compound, you start to notice all the little things you do wrong.
Yeah,
Well,
that's why we're such big advocates for shooting way farther than you would ever shoot in the woods.
Yeah.
Because it highlights those
your small
poor form.
imperfections. And
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's definitely something that I have noticed
even more.
even more now. And obviously the form's totally different with that. But I've really noticed that I've had to lock in and pay really, really close attention to it. And like I said, I've been taking notes with, like what you said, how I've been really honing in. It's all a feel thing. So when I make sure every time that I'm pulling back to my anchor point and focusing on my form more so than putting the arrow where I want it right now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm starting to focus where I'm putting my arrow now, but at first it was all form.
Trying to be consistent with each arrow. So even if it's, 5 inches to the left,
Yeah.
if all your arrows are 5 inches to the left, you're doing the right thing. At least
Yeah.
your form's consistent. Then you can work on your aim points.
Exactly. And that's where I'm starting to get to now. My draw is consistent. I'm starting to get more consistent in my form, and I can start focusing on putting that arrow where I want it. And I am starting to group pretty well, and I'm just honing in on that muscle memory. And whenever I put an arrow where I want it, it's not really something that, I take notes on it. I write stuff down, how I feel, where exactly I felt on each shot, if I hit my arm or something, if my form was a little bit off. But it's tough to say because, I don't aim at a spot. I just look where I want my arrow to be. And then as I draw, I kind of make sure my string is lined up with my arrow. So, my arrow almost disappears with my string.
Okay.
Uh,
So that kind of puts you on, your eye is on the string and the string's on the arrow, and then the arrow's on the target. Kind of,
Yeah.
is that basically what
yeah,
you're...
and then I don't look at specific aim points. I don't say, okay, the tip of my arrow is on this spot, or
Okay.
this part of my bow is on this spot. I just kind of draw. I know I'm on my anchor point. I know I'm lined up with my string and my arrow, and I just sort of have this wide sight picture. I see the whole target, and I just feel it that way, and I try to ingrain those things into, even though it's not like a specific thing that I am looking at, when I see it and then I put the arrow in the right spot, I'm like, okay, that was what needs to get ingrained into my mind.
I think taking notes is a big thing that is probably overlooked. So you can go back, if you had a really good day, you've got all documented how it happened.
Yeah.
And then, 3 days later, all of a sudden you're shooting like shit. You can, go back and be like, okay, I was shooting really well this day. What was I doing differently than today?
Yeah.
So how far are you shooting now? I know at first you were shooting 10 yards. Are you still at 10 or have you...
No, I've stepped back. I pretty much just shoot 20. I don't shoot any closer than 20 anymore. I'm going to, just because...
You need to know...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to know how the bow shoots at different distances. But right now, I'm comfortable enough. I backed up to 20 yards, and I'm not, missing the target at all or anything. I'm putting pretty good groups on the target. And I'm probably going to stay at 20 for a while.
Your groups look better than a lot of guys I've seen shoot their compound at 20 yards. So,
Yeah, that's true.
I've seen several guys that they break their bow out, in September, and their 20-yard groups are pretty atrocious.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting sometimes. But yeah, I plan on just staying at 20 for now and continuing to focus on my form and work into the groups and getting the aim down and trying to hit different spots once I get more and more comfortable. And then once I know I'm really locked in at 20, I'll back up to 30 or 20, 25, 30.
Yeah, and at that point, you'll start to be able to calculate how much drop you have. So it'll just be a little bit of just aiming a little higher.
Yeah, exactly. And I do plan on, the arrows that I have been using are not going to be my hunting arrows. I bought some cheap arrows to practice with because I was like, I'm probably going to lose an arrow or two doing this, just learning how to do it. I figured I was going to miss the target a lot, just getting into the feel of things. So I got some cheaper arrows.
Because you, essentially don't have any experience shooting traditional before now. I know you've thrown a few arrows, but I feel like it's so minimal that it's not really
Yeah, I
Or
wouldn't
you
call
wouldn't-
it experience.
Yeah.
I've done it in the past.
You've
but-
dabbled.
Yes, I've dabbled, but I would say I have no experience with
Gotcha.
it until now because I've never been serious about it. I've picked up a couple different bows over the years, since high school until now.
Yeah, because in our high school in gym class, I can't remember what year it is, you shoot recurves.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the extent of my experience or dabbling,
Yeah.
if you will. So, like, I'm assuming yours is similar to that. I know your
Yeah.
dad's got a recurve that you've flung a few arrows with, but
Yeah, and that is the extent of mine, that shooting in high school a little bit and then shooting dad's recurve a little bit, which his bow is a 70-pound bow. It's way heavier than I should have started with. So
yeah. But your dad's
sure
also a
anything-
massive man. So.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm getting at is anything that I did shooting his bow, I'm sure was nothing but bad.
Yeah,
as far
just
as
bad
form
habits.
goes, because I don't want to say I was too weak to pull the bow. I could pull the bow, but I was not effective with it at all.
Yeah.
It was just not the right setup to start with at all. And the bow that I bought, like I said, is a 50-pound bow. And honestly, if I were recommending it to somebody, I would say start with a 40-pound bow.
And why is that? Just
Just
not for hunting necessarily, or
no, it's just to get into it. I would say start with a lighter bow, just so you're not working so hard to get that perfect form every time pulling that bow back, because your form is that's the most paramount thing with that, is getting consistently pulling your bow back to the exact same spot in the exact same way every time. And the heavier that bow gets, the harder you have to try to do that.
Yeah.
So if you're someone that's just getting into it, and honestly, I probably, if I didn't already commit and say it out loud that I'm hunting with it this year, I would say shoot a lighter bow for a year. And like get dialed in, figure out how to do it, because once you're doing it, I've talked to other people that have done it. They can kind of jump from bow to bow. Like they'll go from a 30-pound bow to a 60-pound bow to a 40-pound bow. Like they can move around, and it doesn't take them much to figure out where
their arrows are hitting.
Yeah.
So it would be something that, like, early on in the year, you could be using a lighter poundage, to get the repetition and build your form up. And then, 2 months before the season, you can switch up to your hunting setup.
Yeah.
And then, just it's a matter of changing your aim point, essentially.
Yeah. And pretty much everybody that I know and talk to that is a traditional archery hunter, they have several bows. Very few people that are really into it have one bow, and they're all different poundages, and whether or not that's like the reason that they have it, but I definitely see that would be a benefit when you're first getting into it. Shoot a lighter bow for a while, really get dialed in with that, get your form with that, so you're not struggling with that weight as another obstacle to getting better with it.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, it's hard enough already. You don't want to throw more problems into the mix when you're trying to figure it out.
And I've noticed, I always assumed that like recurves were much cheaper than today's flagship compounds, and they're not at all.
They are the same price.
Like the only thing that like the benefit is that you're not buying stabilizers and sights and stuff like that really starts adding a lot of you can easily drop as much as what you spend on your bow on all of your attachments. If you like a back bar and a stabilizer on the front and a sight, and like depending on your sight, like you can easily drop another $800 to $1,000 on all of your attachments and stuff.
To put on your $1,200 bow.
Yeah. So that's one, I guess, benefit. But I always assumed that like recurves were going to be way cheaper, and
And you can get them cheaper.
Yeah.
Like my bow was a $600 bow, so that's cheaper than most flagship bows. But it's very easy to spend $1,000, $1,500 on a recurve.
Yeah. And I mean, and you went with a Fred Bear, which I feel like is the grandfather of, traditional archery.
Yeah.
So it's a quality bow. There's a lot of like custom recurves out there that you can, guys that just make a handful a year. And they've always just made me nervous just because you don't know I mean, obviously if they have a track record,
Yeah.
it's one thing, but like Fred Bear has got a very long history of
Yeah.
recurves, and they just make really nice bows.
Yeah.
So I know you said that right now you're shooting cheaper arrows. You've been doing a lot of research on what you want to move into for hunting. So tell me a little bit about what arrows you're looking at and why.
I am pretty sure I've settled in. I've looked at a couple other arrows for different reasons, but I think what I'm settling into are Grizzly sticks. They have just a phenomenal track record with penetration and
Oh, the videos that they post, I mean, they're getting full passers on Cape Buffaloes.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of guys that are, hunting African big game with those arrows and broadheads are using traditional equipment. They have a good track record with using that system with traditional archery equipment.
The Whitetail Adrenaline guy, that Jared Scheffler,
Yeah,
he's a Grizzly stick guy.
yeah.
And I mean, his videos are awesome. We've been just
doubt.
ripping through the videos at camp. But so, I mean, he was the first person that I heard talking about Grizzly stick. And then, I started following them and looking at it. It's very impressive, the penetration that they get with those arrows.
Yeah, and that whole system is built on a high FOC platform.
And I think with shooting such slower speeds, you need that higher FOC. You need that arrow to carry through.
Yes, and that's what has settled me into that. I've looked at some other arrows that have a good track record with penetration, but I've never, like those arrows I don't see a lot with traditional archery. It's all people that are shooting, Matthews.
Over 300 feet per second.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm shooting, probably under 200 feet per second with my bow, somewhere around there. I haven't spot or put it on a chronograph, but it's obviously much slower than a compound.
Yeah.
So I want an arrow that I know and have observed gets great penetration
At those speeds.
those speeds, and that high FOC. And they have a lot of weights, and that whole system is all about weighting that arrow, making it heavy, having it heavy front of center, and it just equals penetration. And that's what's really got me steered in that direction. They're a durable arrow. I haven't talked to people. I've watched a lot of videos, and I've seen a couple people say that there's some issues with the way that collar system works on them. They can wobble a little bit after you shoot them through a concrete block or something, but
You're not aiming at concrete blocks.
exactly. And even if I do send it through a shoulder blade and it starts to wobble a little bit, and watching them, because they put them on like an arrow spinner.
Yeah.
And the one guy was saying how this particular arrow that he was showing on the spinner, and he had a close up and it was just barely wobbling.
After going through concrete, or
he shot it through 2 shoulder blades and buried it in the ground, and then the one deer that he shot, it went through the far shoulder blade and then buried in a tree, and it was wobbling a little bit. But honestly, you can get arrows straight from the factory, like their .006 straightness,
yeah.
that wobble about that much.
Yeah.
So if that's all it is, it's going to fail,
Yeah.
then I'm not worried about that.
In my opinion, too, if I kill one animal with the arrow, that arrow has done its job.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody that is going to complain if it wobbles after putting it through a shoulder or buries into a tree afterwards. A lot of times, even if the arrow is perfect, that arrow just gets put up on the wall anyways. That's just how I do it. Now, last year, just because I wanted to, I shot my buck and my doe with the same arrow. But 99% of the time, when that arrow is meant for one animal, and that's it.
Yeah, and I've done it several times. I've reused arrows and broadheads and stuff. But like you said, if I shoot one animal with it, I got my money out of that arrow. It did its job. It killed an animal. That's why I bought it. Yeah. And people complain, they're like, oh, you spend so much money on these Grizzly stick components and whatnot, and then you run it through a couple shoulder blades and it's done. Well, what do you mean? Then it's done. Like, yeah, it did its job. That's all you
Yeah.
needed it to do was kill that animal, and you got a couple out of it. So why are you complaining? They are expensive. I
Yeah.
won't deny that.
Oh,
but-
I mean, I spent more on arrows this year than I ever have.
Yeah.
Just going with the micro diameter, 75 grain outserts, and like just
and those
everything.
those grizzly sticks are a smaller diameter shaft, and they're tapered.
So the taper, that's one of the big things with penetration. And the only reason I didn't get a taper is because the ones I was looking at were had like an aluminum core, and they're prone to bending.
Yeah,
and
'cause
even
that
just
aluminum,
even just in target shooting. So like I was worried about target shooting and bending them,
Yeah.
which I don't want.
Yeah.
But
the grizzly sticks are all carbon. There's not
Yeah.
anything in them that's gonna
So
bend.
yeah, what's nice about that taper is a lot of them they'll start at like 6 and taper down to 4. So what it does is it's putting a bigger hole at the beginning, so you have less friction as the arrow passes through.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of reason why I went to the 4mm arrows, is because there's just less surface area to touch when it's passing through the animal. And I did a lot of testing this year on different arrows, and you take like your standard 5mm arrow. I could put an extra 200 grains on a 5mm arrow, and it still couldn't penetrate as much as a 4mm arrow.
Yeah.
So that was what made me switch over. So if you take, basically you're taking like the entrance of a bigger, like, so you get the weight of that bigger arrow, but then it tapers down to that 4. It just helps that much more
Yeah.
with your penetration, because it starts with a bigger hole and then everything else is smaller.
Exactly. So yeah, that's most likely the system I'm gonna go with, and they're really customizable as far as weight goes, because that whole system is all about weight and getting penetration. So you can order arrows from a 400 grain arrow all the way up to a 1300 grain arrow, and it's all the same shaft. It's just how they weight it and different things. There's a lot of different weight components that you can screw together, put inside of it.
So
and
what weight are you looking at going with, do you think?
I'll probably shoot 600 grain.
That's kind of what I figured.
Yeah, because I don't plan on shooting grizzly stick broadheads yet. I really, really like my Annihilators, and I'm gonna stick with them this year. I'm gonna have those broadheads on the grizzly stick arrow, and I have a 125 grain broadhead. So if I were to build that same arrow system with the
So
grizzly
you need like
stick,
a 475 grain arrow, and then that 125 grain.
correct. So if I were to build that same arrow and use a grizzly stick broadhead, I would get a 200 grain broadhead, and it would get that
So you just
overall weight up. And that's they recommend you use their broadheads, but that's
it's-
a company thing.
yeah, of course.
And I'm sure that it does work better with their system, because it's pretty well proven that a single bevel 2-blade broadhead penetrates better than pretty much any broadhead there is. But I really like the blood trails and the penetration that I get out of the Annihilators. So I'm going to stick with those.
I like how easy they are to sharpen as well.
Yeah.
Like
very
it's just
easy.
a single bevel is much more difficult if you don't understand sharpening.
Yes.
And I don't.
Yeah.
It's just not my forte. I could learn it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
Annihilators, you just run it on a flat stone and
Yeah.
you're good to go.
Exactly. It's very simple. They're a great, very durable broadhead. I've shot 3 deer with one broadhead, and it's still razor sharp. It's still
You haven't
shaves
even
when I-
touched it up?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, see, that's
No,
nice.
and I check it
Yeah.
after every deer I've killed, I've checked it, and it still shaves the hair off my arm, and it's
Yeah, it's all you can ask for.
yeah, exactly. It's as sharp as you need it to be. So I love those broadheads. They're very, very durable.
They're
So I-
kind of new to the archery scene, in the past probably 4 years maybe.
Yeah, I think the first time I saw them was at the Harrisburg show 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, and they caught my eye because, they're sitting there in their booth just throwing it through a steel car hood.
Yeah,
I mean,
over and over and
over
over.
and over and over. I think they did it like 15 sometimes. Like, ridiculous. And it just kept full pass through, full pass through, full pass through. And there's a guy on YouTube, I think his name's Lusk, and he's like one of the most, unbiased broadhead reviewers on YouTube, and he was really impressed with the Annihilators and everything. So he pretty much every broadhead that's on the market, that guy has done a full in-depth like half-hour video, and he's got a very controlled test. You know, he's not sponsored by anybody.
Yeah,
and he's got
he's just putting them to the test,
yeah,
seeing what
he's
works.
got a control. So every single broadhead goes through the same exact tests, and then he's got tests to check sharpness before and after, and you know, different things that, you know, I watched his stuff on the Annihilators, and he was very impressed with those. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, just, you know, or I guess it's not that it will be interesting. It is interesting to see him compare them with other broadheads, and I think he's done grizzly sticks as well. I think they're what, Ashby's or something, or Samurais.
They have several different ones. They have Samurais. They have that Ashby arrow. The Ashby one's a 315 grain arrow, or arrowhead, I should say. The broadhead.
That is massive.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, that's
pretty
more of
serious.
like an African setup.
Yeah,
but
that's what it's built for, shooting grizzlies or moose or African big game, not so much whitetails. But they're like the Samurais. They make those in a 125, a 150, and a 200. And that would be like, if I were to ever switch to them, that would be what I would go with.
Samurais.
I wouldn't go with that Ashby 315 grain arrow. I'd go with a 200 grain.
maybe
arrow.
if you ever decide to take it for a moose.
Yeah, maybe that'd be wild, huh?
Yeah, recurve moose kill would be insane.
Yeah,
I would hope I'm there for that.
I would hope you would be too.
Yeah.
That'd be sweet.
So any further comments or anything, like, as you know, the season's going to sneak up on us fast.
Oh, it will too, because this summer is going to be wicked busy, and all of a sudden it's going to be October.
Yeah, I mean, because we've got, in a couple weeks, we've got Tom's bachelor party, and then the wedding, and then we've got Whitecap Palooza, and just
Yeah.
crazy stuff. We got, you know, building the bar and stuff. It's just, it's going to sneak up on us quick. How many days a week are you shooting right now?
I try to shoot every day. I shot today right when I got out of work. I shot last night. I won't be able to shoot tomorrow, but I try to shoot every day. If I miss a day, I make sure I shoot the next day.
So you're never taking more than a day off,
Correct.
basically. Gotcha. And that's going to be really important for you.
Yeah, and I plan to keep that up all summer long. I don't want to relax on it. Once I start getting more proficient, I don't want to
Yeah.
start.
Once you get proficient, that's when you want to back up to 25. And then if you do it again, get
Exactly.
up to 30.
Yeah.
What is going to be your effective range? Or I guess, what's your goal for effective range while hunting?
I want to be able to shoot something at 25 yards, which
So you're going to want to be practicing out to 30, 35, I would imagine.
yes, oh, no doubt, no doubt. And that's about where I'm at with a compound as well. You know, I'd shoot 30 yards with a compound, but I wouldn't go farther than that just because.
There's so much that can happen.
Yeah.
I've taken shots farther and it's worked. But I've also seen plenty of guys, you know, for me, I prefer my shots inside 20.
I do too.
And there's
I
a
like,
lot of guys.
I like 15 to 18. That's like my wheelhouse. I
Yeah.
try to set up so that my shots are 15 yards.
Yeah,
I
I
don't like
get-
them to get much closer than that because then it starts getting steep and tricky.
Yeah.
But that 15 to 20 yards, that is such a perfect distance.
Yeah, the last 3 deer I've killed with my bow, and that was the last 3 deer I've shot at too, have been inside 15.
Yeah.
And it's close, obviously, but I practice for those shots.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's what I'm comfortable with. You know, I've my furthest shot I've taken is 35, and I killed that deer as well. But conditions have to be absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, there's so much that can go wrong with a whitetail when you
Yeah.
go out to 30, 35 yards. You know, I know guys that'll shoot further than that, and if they're comfortable, you know, more power to them. But most of my setups anymore, my furthest shot's 20, 25 anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so I still practice. You know, I like to throw arrows at 100 yards just because it makes
same
20
here.
so much quicker or closer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no doubt. And I would like to get so that I can shoot at 40 yards, you know, whether or not that happens. I'm sure eventually I'll get there.
yeah.
But I want to practice at 40 yards eventually this summer and start to dial in. I would never shoot that far with a recurve.
Yeah. It's just too slow.
Yeah. They're like all the shit that can go wrong with a compound make it even more because the arrow's going almost half the speed. Not quite half, but
Is the bow quieter than a compound? Like, what's the?
No, it's.
I didn't know if there's like any benefit that way. That like, hey, you know, I know you're shooting a lot slower, but at least it's quieter.
No,
or
it's
not?
about the same, and I'm gonna put like some beaver fur on my string to dampen the sound a little bit more, but it's not that much quieter.
And how
I
long
would
does
say
your-
it's about the same?
Shooting every day like that. How long does that string last?
I really couldn't tell you. I haven't really asked anybody about how long their strings last or how often you should change them. I haven't noticed the least bit of wear on mine.
Okay.
Like even like, you know, like when you knock your arrows all the time, you get
Yeah.
a smooth spot on your string right there. You can see how like the
It's
strands of your string kind of
Gloss over a little bit.
yeah, because of the wax and everything. I haven't noticed that at all, and
No
it's
fraying
still-
or anything.
No, yeah. It.
Well, you know what I
still-
mean? Like not like
yeah.
fraying, but like, you know, as you shoot more and
Yeah.
more, it seems like you get these little
Mhm.
like hairs off the side of your, you know, you just wax them and stuff. But
Yeah, but no, I haven't noticed the least bit of wear in it, and I've been shooting very consistently for the last 2 months, more so like every day the last month. And I haven't noticed a bit. That's a good thing I should look into, though, how often you should.
yeah, because you don't
Change
want to
your
be throwing
string.
a new string on a week before season.
No.
You know, if you do have to change it, you want to give it a little bit of time to break it in and
Yeah, figure it out. But
yeah.
yeah, I can't imagine that it's an every year thing.
Yeah,
Just
I
given
don't
the
know.
amount that I've shot and haven't
And
noticed anything.
There's not nearly as much energy going through that string than there is a compound, and I change my compound string like every other year.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and I was the same. It was like every other year ish.
sometimes I know my Matthews LX, I ran that string way longer than I should have. That was one of them things where it was like I forgot about it, and then it was all of a sudden it's like mid-September, and I'm like,
This thing's
shit.
about to come apart.
I'm like, shit. Like,
I know that's how my first hunting bow was a Martin Leopard, and I got it when I was 12, the first year I could bow hunt, and I don't think I changed the string on that till I was 17. Like it
Yeah.
was way overdue.
yeah. I remember, because I got my Matthews LX was used from my dad, and my dad, you know, it wasn't a fresh string when he got it, and I remember first time I got into a tree stand by myself with a compound, it was still pitch black, and you know, at that point, we have a ladder stand that we bolted to the back of the barn to give us that feel. You know, as it gets closer to the
You
season,
can
I like
practice up in the air.
yeah. But that hunt, you know, October 1st or whatever it was, sometime opening day, it was the first time I was in the timber hunting by myself, and I was like, oh, you know, I'm gonna, you know, just draw back and see what it feels like, you know, just make sure that, you know, like my elbow's not going to hit a tree, you know, I think every setup I make, I always draw my bow back.
Same here. Every time, the first thing I do when I get set up, I draw in every spot that I think am gonna draw on a deer, and then I move between those draws.
Yeah.
To make sure I have clear spots to move my bow, move my elbow.
Yeah, because I mean, especially with the way we hunt, where a lot of times, you know, there's certain trees where I'll hunt one time a year. So it's I just once I get up, some of them I'm in ridiculously tight spots.
Yeah.
That you know, I there's some trees I've been in where it's like, you know, this is not ideal, but like, and I have one window to shoot, so I'll make sure that I can get drawn back there. But anyway, so I went to draw back. I got like 3/4 of the way, and my D loop just snapped, and I just sent my broadhead flying. I did find that arrow later after my morning hunt, because I mean I had a couple arrows, but
Yeah.
I panicked a little bit because, you know, my D loop just broke.
Yeah.
But I remembered when I was young, like when I first started shooting, I didn't have a D loop on my bow. I would just put my release just below the arrow. So what I ended up doing is at the time I used to carry a judo tip, which I found out later you're not supposed to do. So I don't do it anymore. But at the time, once I had to knock underneath, I took that judo tip and I picked, there was like a mushroom that like, it was like, I don't know what kind of mushroom it was, but one of them ones that like grows off the side of a tree.
Yeah.
And it was at like 20, 25, somewhere in there. And I just took that judo tip and flung one from the bottom just to make sure that, okay,
it's
this
not
is
going to throw off how your arrow flies.
and I crushed the mushroom. So I was like, okay, we're still okay.
Yeah. Can still hunt.
Yeah. But it was just like, you know, reminded me big time, come, August, July, you need to really be checking your equipment. If you don't think you're going to make it through the season in August, change it now.
Yeah.
Do not try, every bow shop hates the guy that comes in mid-September and needs it yesterday.
Yeah.
So, by like around end of July, I'm usually really inspecting my equipment, making sure, yes, this is going to make it through the season.
Yeah. No doubt. Very, very important. I don't have to worry about breaking a D loop though.
No, you don't.
All fingers.
Good deal. Well, thanks for giving us an update on your venture into traditional archery. It's going to be a fun year. I look forward to seeing how you do. And
yeah, I'm going to say that I'm not going to miss anything this year, but I've talked to pretty much everybody that I've talked to.
I feel like you're going to be even more
missing.
Excited
Oh,
with
doubt.
with a recurve in your hand than you would a compound.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing when you go from like a rifle to a compound. I get way more jacked up when I get a buck in there with, like in bow range versus, like last year I killed a buck at like 5 yards with my bow. And then I killed a buck in rifle at like 100 yards. And I was excited after the fact, but I didn't nearly get the jitters that I did leading up to the shot with the rifle. Like it was basically sitting there in my tree stand, saw the deer. I thought it was a doe at first just because my eyes are not what they used to be. And it was because I saw a doe go over there, and about 10 minutes later I saw a deer come out, and I was like, oh, there's that doe. And it worked about like 15 yards, and I was like, man, that is way bigger than the doe. So I checked it with the scope, and I was like, oh shit, that's a buck. But I didn't get nearly as excited. So I think you're going to find the same jump from a compound to a recurve as most people would find from a rifle to a compound.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm really, really excited for it. I've been thinking a lot about like scenarios and like how I think
visualizing is
set up
important.
Yeah, it is very important. It's just like taking notes and stuff and getting in the mindset every time.
Oh, every setup I put in, during hunting season, while I'm waiting, like sitting there hunting and stuff, I am visualizing a buck coming from here, how he's going to work through, know, and just constantly the entire time I sit in the tree stand. That's how I pass time. Is just visualize a buck coming from this way, a buck coming from this way. What's going to happen if he does this? What's going to happen if he does this?
And I plan on doing a lot of that situational stuff. Like I plan on going and getting into a couple of the spots I plan to hunt, because I plan on doing some ground hunting again this year like I did last year. And I have yet to shoot that bow like sitting on the ground or kneeling or anything like that, just because I'm still trying to figure it out.
It's different. I noticed, this year, because I was supposed to be turkey hunting with a bow until my sight broke. But I noticed a little bit of a difference, shooting from my knees than standing up or sitting down. Because like I most of the time I shoot sitting down when I'm archery hunting, just because I'm more comfortable sitting than standing. I move a lot less. Yeah. I do shoot standing up when I have to, but the most likely course that I think the buck's going to take, I usually put that on my left side and set up for just a sitting shot, because I've been burned, I think twice, not having my bow in my hand. And since then, during archery season, my bow is in my lap 100% of the time. Like, I do not put it in a hanger or anything unless I'm taking a pee. Like that bow, if I'm sitting, it's on my lap. If I'm standing, I'm usually facing the tree, and it's like my hand's on the bow, and it's just sitting on the seat. I work way too hard to have a buck in range and not be able to throw an arrow. Like nothing fires me up more than having a bow or a buck in range and I can't get an arrow off. It just chaps my ass. And it just so I try to eliminate any possibility of that happening by just holding my bow 100% of the time. But I guess we'll wrap it up there. Appreciate you, like I said, giving the update here. Hopefully we can get Tom on next week. I think Tom is looking at possibly a trip to the Adirondacks for some late turkey season this year.
Nice.
So if that's the case, if the weather allows, Tom's gonna be doing that. So hopefully we can talk about that. But turkey season's, it's crunch time. So if you guys haven't gotten your bird, make sure you guys are all still getting outside.